203, since the Andean Health Organization, Hipólito Unanue Agreement, started a cycle of webinars in May 2020. It is almost 4 years of continuous learning. On this occasion, we are pleased to present the webinar Human Rights Universal, Indivisible, and Linked to Mother Earth that has the goal to commemorate the International Day of Human Rights that was celebrated in December 10, and the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We also have the opportunity to learn about a significant experience of human rights defense and the right to a clean environment that's healthy and sustainable. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a global blueprint for international, national, and local laws and policies, and an essential pillar of the 2030 Agenda for SDGs. Likewise, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development builds on the declaration. That agenda must be implemented in a way that realizes human rights for all people. This would be one of the topics of the Notice Salud Andinas Bulletin December edition, which we invite you to read and you can find on the website of the Andean Health Organization. We invite you to leave your name, organization, and country in the comment box of the Facebook Live or YouTube Live chat. In the same space, you can leave your questions or send them via email to webinarhorasconu@gmail.com. In this webinar, we will follow the usual dynamics. We will start with institutional greeting, followed by the presentations of our speakers, and then we will move on to the Q&A session. To access the certificate of attendance, as usual, in any of the Facebook Live or YouTube Live chats, you will find a fixed link where you must fill out a brief survey and leave your data such as email. Please verify that your email is correctly written for the certificate that will be sent to you in the following days. Begin this important day, I give the floor to Dr. Maria del Carmen Calle, Executive Secretary of the Andean Health Organization, who will give the welcome and institutional greeting. Go ahead, Dr. Calle. Thank you, Bertita. We are celebrating webinar number 203 and the last webinar for this year. Very important topic. We're talking about human rights. The Andean Health Organization, Hipólito Unanue Agreement, was established by decisions of the ministers of health of Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela in December of 1971. On December 18, we will celebrate 52 years of uninterrupted work and a renewed institutional vision. The inhabitants of the Andean region enjoy the right to health and well-being. Inequalities have been reduced, and there is a greater capacity of a joint response to common health, socioeconomic, and environmental challenges through regional integration and cooperation. May 2020, we have been holding webinars every week. The aim of promoting continuous interlearning. Welcome to webinar number 203, Human Rights, Universal, Indivisible, and Linked to Mother Earth. December 10, 2023, marked the 75th anniversary of one of the most revolutionary global commitments, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in Paris on December 10, 1948, as a common ideal for all nations. This historic document enshrines the inherent rights of all human beings, without distinction of race, color, religion, sex, language, political, or other opinion, national or social origin, property, or other status. Human rights include the right to life, health, and freedom. Freedom from slavery and torture. Freedom of opinion and expression, education and work, and many more. These rights apply to all people without discrimination of any kind. Notwithstanding the promise of dignity, freedom, justice, and equality for all people, the world faces new and continuous challenges such as wars, pandemics, violence, poverty, inequalities, injustice, racism, planetary crisis, climate change, loss of biodiversity and pollution, among many others. At the Andean Health Organization, we promote respect and guarantee of human rights, a right to health and a healthy environment. Our reference framework in the Strategic Plan 2023-2030 emphasizes health is a fundamental human right and indispensable for the exercise of all other human rights. Every human being has a right to the enjoyment of the highest possible level of health that allows him, her to live in dignity. Top speakers. This webinar seeks to motivate us, strengthen our knowledge and activism, make human rights a reality for all people everywhere in the world. Welcome, Claire Donaldson, Fritz Boehm, and Guillermo Olmedo. Welcome to all the people who join us in the fight against the worst disease, indifference. Thank you very much, dear Dr. Maricarmen. After the greeting of our Executive Secretary, I introduce myself. My name is Bertaluz Pineda, sociologist, coordinator of climate change and inequalities in the Andean Health Organization. And today, with great pleasure, I'm in charge of moderating this webinar. After this preamble, let's start with a short video of celebration of the World Day of Human Rights. In the words of Dr. Volker Turk, United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a blueprint for a better future, a guiding light. It represents a powerful unifying force for equality, social progress, justice, and respect. But the journey towards human rights is not a path that was completed in 1948 or when Nelson Mandela walked free. It is an ongoing quest that requires each of us to be torchbearers of change. It is a call to action that transcends borders, cultures, and beliefs. As we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, let us remember that it is not just a historical document, but a living testament to our shared humanity, a timeless guide. In its spirit, let us forge a path of hope, unity, and justice, lighting the way for generations to come.
Qué interesante mensaje. Juntos
Interesting message.
podemos visualizar
Together,
un
we can
futuro donde los
visualize a
derechos de
future
cada persona
where the
queden
rights of each
protegidos,
people are
los conflictos
protected,
se resuelvan a través del
conflicts are
diálogo
solved
y la
through
unidad
dialogue,
prevalezca la paz.
and peace
Juntos y
prevails.
juntas
Together,
tenemos el potencial
we
de
have
crear
the
un
potential
futuro
to
de
create
más
a
paz y
more peaceful
sostenibilidad.
and
Hoy más que
sustainable
nunca
future
es el
for our
momento
planet.
de los derechos
Today, more
humanos.
than ever, is the
A
time for human
continuación,
rights.
le damos la
Now,
más
we would like to
cordialmente
extend a
hola al
warm
doctor
welcome
Fritz
to
Bowen.
Dr. Fritz
Él
Bowen.
nació en Australia,
He was
es
born in
exdirector y
Australia.
actualmente
He currently
coordinador
works
de la Unidad
the
de Justicia de la
Justice
Misión Técnica
Coordinator
en
of
Perú
the
de la Oficina del
Peruvian
Alto
Technical
Comisionado
Mission
de las
of the
Naciones
Human
Unidas
Rights
para
Office,
los Derechos Humanos.
United Nations for Human
Tiene
Rights.
más de 10
He
años de
has more than
experiencia
10 years of
trabajando en temas de
experience
derechos humanos y
working
gobernanza
in human
democrática
rights
en
topics
las Naciones Unidas,
in
el
the
Consejo de
UN,
Europa, la sociedad
European
civil y la
Council, the
comunidad
civil
científica,
society,
con
and the
trabajo
academic
íntegro
world,
en América Latina y el
working in
Caribe,
Latin
en
America and in the
Guyana,
Caribbean,
Perú,
Guatemala,
Colombia,
Peru,
Guyana y los
Colombia,
Balcanes
Guyana, and
occidentales,
the
así como
Western Balkan
puestos en
countries
la
as
sede
well
de la
as
Oficina del
working
Alto Comisionado
the
de las
High
Naciones Unidas
Commission's
para los
Office
Derechos
for
Humanos en
Human Rights
Ginebra y en
in
el Consejo
Geneva,
de Europa en Estambul.
European Council,
Cursó estudios de
Istanbul,
Derecho
where he studied
Internacional,
of
Derechos Humanos
international
y
rights,
Ciencias Políticas en
human
París
rights and
y en la
political science in
Universidad
Paris
Austral de
and
Buenos
in the
Aires, entre otros.
Universidad Austral de
Adelante,
Buenos Aires.
estimado doctor
Go
Fritz,
ahead,
es suyo el
Dr. Fritz,
espacio.
floor.
Muchísimas gracias, Berta, por la
Thank you very
introducción
much,
y
Berta,
un
for the
saludo cordial
introduction
de parte
and
de la Oficina del
greetings
Alto Comisionado,
on
un
my
saludo a la
office,
Secretaria Ejecutiva, María
Executive Secretary to Maria
Carmen
del
y a
Carmen
todas las personas
Talle,
que nos están
and to all of
viendo
who
el día de
are
hoy para
watching us in this
para esta presentación
webinar
que estamos teniendo sobre un tema muy
about
importante,
a
que
very
es el
important topic with the
Universal de Derechos
Universal
Humanos,
Declaration
que
of Human
está
Rights
celebrando
that is
75
celebrating
años
its
en
75th
estos días, en
anniversary
este diciembre, como todos
in
sabemos,
December,
y
as we know,
voy a
in
hablar
December 10th.
brevemente hoy,
And I
unos
will
20
briefly
minutos, sobre
talk
esta
about 20
declaración, pero
minutes
más bien
about this
qué
declaration
significa para
and
nosotros
what it
y
means
nosotras
for
y
us
qué oportunidades nos
and
da este
what
documento, porque es
opportunities
más
do
que un
we
documento,
get
es
with this
celebrar
document. That's
una
much more
fecha
than a
histórica de
document
75 años. Así que
celebrating
no quiero hablar
75
solo de la
years.
historia, pero
I would
quiero
not to
hablar también de
like
sus
to talk about the
objetivos
history
y
alone,
el
but also its
impacto que
significance and the
este
impact
tan
that
importante
this
documento puede
important
tener para
document
nosotros,
may
para
have
el presente, que es
for
un
us
presente lleno de desafíos, pero también para el
for this
futuro
present
de los
that's
derechos
full of
humanos
challenges and also for the
y todos.
future of
La
human rights
Declaración
of
Universal de
everyone.
los Derechos
The
Humanos
Universal Declaration
es
of
un
Human
bien
Rights,
común para el que
common
todas las
ideal
naciones
to
deben
all
esforzarse.
nations should
Y en este sentido, el
thrive.
Plan
In
Global
this
para las
regard,
leyes y
the
políticas
global
globales
blueprint for
recoge
international, national, and
internacionales
local laws
y
and
uno de los
policies
pilares
and
clave de lo que llamamos la
key
Agenda
pillars of what we
2030,
call
los
the
Objetivos
2030 agenda
de Desarrollo
for
Sostenible que son
sustainable
fundamentales.
development.
La
That
primera
as
dispositiva, por favor.
the
Exacto.
first slide,
Quien
please.
ven ahí es
You
a la
see
señora Roosevelt, que en el año
Mr. Roswell that
1948
in
presentó
1948
esta
introduced
Declaración
this
Universal y
universal
justo
declaration,
cumplió
a
el
declaration
cometido de la
that
reducción
was
atómica
drafted
de dos
from
conflictos mundiales
the two
y de
world
una
conflicts
profunda devastación
and a
económica en la
profound
década de los
economic
años 30
devastation
y
in the
generaciones de
30s
explotación y
and
opresión
generations of colonial
brutales.
exploitation
Fue
and
eran
oppression.
representantes de
It was
todas las
drafted
regiones
by
del mundo
representatives with
y
different
de verdad
legal and
se
cultural
celebran
backgrounds from
históricos,
all regions of the world.
culturales y lo que logra esta
And
declaración
what
son
this
principios
declaration
universales,
is a set of
indivisibles
universal,
y
indivisible,
inalienables
and
sobre,
inalienable
sobre
rights,
todo la igualdad, la
recognizing the
dignidad
equal
y el valor
dignity
de
and
todas
worth
las personas.
of
Y
every
este es un
person.
hito porque hasta este
And
momento
up to
no
this
existía.
moment,
De hecho, fue la primera vez que la
this
comunidad internacional
it was
estuvo
the
de
first
acuerdo
time
sobre
that
un
the international
conjunto de
community
valores
agreed
comunes y
of a set of
reconocido que los derechos
values
son
and
inherentes a
acknowledged
cada
that
ser
rights
humano
are inherent to every single
libres
human
del
being
Estado, pero los
and not
derechos
granted
por
by the
ser
state.
seres humanos
no matter where we come from, what language we speak, and what skin color or race we have. From the right to education and equal pay, this declaration established for the first time the indivisible and inalienable rights of all humanity, and it continues to inspire movements for change for a more equal and inclusive world of benefit to everyone. It's if as a map of tactical and pragmatic solutions. It's, to, it's a base of human rights today and for the last decade. It will continue to be. It includes many lessons of history that can guide us to the right course. And I mentioned equality, dignity, freedom, justice, participation in decisions, and the full range of civil and political rights, economic, social, and cultural rights, together with a right to development and the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. They build societies that we're looking for, which are societies more peaceful because they can solve disputes based on these rights, more sustainably developed because they're fair and inclusive, and more resilient to shocks or crisis because there is a coherent sense of community based on trust. Please. I'm sure everybody who's participated in this event. Now, why are we talking about human rights if we're in a critical point of humankind full of conflicts? And it seems that the geopolitical, there are more challenges of finding a common path. And we can see every day we get information about violations in different parts in the world. We are at a critical juncture in everywhere in the world. There were in many places. The Sustainable Development Agenda is dangerously off track with skyrocketing inequalities and poverty levels not seen in a generation. We are seeing a heavy pushback of women's rights in many countries. We are seeing environmental harms, threatens all humanity. We see division, geopolitical tension, institutions. We may say, this reason human rights have failed? No, on the opposite. Happens with human rights are not respected, not implemented, and not prioritized. This leads us to situations like we are facing in many parts of the world. Not that human rights have failed. What failed are the challenges to prevent these situations. We don't respect, we do not prioritize human rights in many regions in the world. To overcome these challenges and pull back from the precipice, we need to stress the centrality of human beings, much more than less, in this critical moment. Whenever and wherever humanity values are abandoned, we all are at a greater risk. Solutions to today's greatest crisis are rooted in human rights, and the origin and the solutions to do with human rights. If you do this analysis, based rights of everyone, very important topic that we always want to reflect is the rights, human rights violations reverberate across borders and generations. This occur in an interconnected world. There's impact on other societies and populations in other parts of the world. This can be, must be collectively overcome. Human rights, when applied, act as guardrails for policies and a blueprint for concrete action toward development, peace, and security. Something that we need to insist worldwide. The Human Nations Human Rights Office, we step our efforts and work with human rights advocates, states, and all partners to deliver on the promise of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights for All. The next slide. I would like to insist that this declaration for us is the cornerstone in the United Nations work, metaphorically and literally.
El preámbulo de la declaración dice que la libertad, la justicia y la
The
paz en el mundo tienen por base el reconocimiento de la dignidad intrínseca
recognition of the
de
inherent
los iguales
dignity and the equal
patrimoniales de
and
todos los miembros de
inalienable
la
rights
familia.
for all members of the human
Dice
family
que
is
no
the
es una
foundation of
sociedad
freedom,
libre
justice,
que
and
puede
peace
abrir la
in the
sostenibilidad
world.
y la amplia
So
acción
human
de
rights
todo el
are the
trabajo de la
key
ONU
that can
para el
unlock the
desarrollo del mundo.
sustainability and broad
Y dice que
effectiveness of
la
all UN work
Constitución es
for
la
development
piedra
and peace.
angular no solo
And it is
metafórica,
the
pero también literalmente.
literally the
El ejemplo
cornerstone
de los años 40 cuando se creó la
when the
primera
first
sede de las
Secretary
Naciones Unidas en
General
Nueva
of the
York.
United Nations
El entonces
was
secretario general colocó la primera piedra
started
del
in New
edificio
York. The
de la ONU
Secretary General
y
laid the
esta
cornerstone
piedra
of this
contenía
building in New
la
York,
Declaración
and it
de
contained a copy of
Derechos
the Universal
también
Declaration
más
of Human Rights.
importante, esta declaración es innata y es central de
This is
nuestro trabajo. Próxima
critical
diapositiva, por
for our
favor.
effort, right?
Defender los derechos de
To
las personas y
uphold the
mercancías y
people's right
educar
and
son los
sustaining
pilares
their well-being
fundamentales para un buen
is
gobierno. Y hay algunos
instrumental
límites
for
que no
government. And
está
there's some element
contemplado
that I
en la
would like
ONU
to
cuando
introduce
hablamos del
you
tema de derechos
when
humanos,
we
que
talk
es
about human rights, which
primero
is
el tema de la igualdad y
first
indivisibilidad.
equality
Todos
and
los seres humanos
indivisibility.
nacen
All human
libres,
rights
iguales, en
are
dignidad
born
y derechos en todas
in
partes. Esto es el
dignity and
preámbulo de la
rights. This is the
declaración y es
preamble of the
un
declaration,
elemento muy
and this is
importante que
a
está
very important
sucediendo
element
hasta el día de hoy en
that
cualquier conflicto,
we,
en cualquier
in
situación que se
any
enfrenten
up
las
to
violaciones de
today, in
derechos
any conflict that we see,
humanos.
we
Hay
need to work on
una
this.
universalidad de
There
los
is a
derechos. Esto significa que
universality,
las
which
personas que
means
sobrevivían en los lugares
that
más
people who live
desfavorecidos,
in the
desprotegidos,
most
que están enfrentando
impoverished
situaciones
areas that are
extremas o
dealing
desafios,
with
hasta los
situations
partidos
of
del
many
poder,
challenges,
todos tenemos exactamente los mismos
we all
derechos
have the
fundamentales
same
y deben
rights
cumplirse. No se puede distinguir.
followed.
Que efectivamente en
There's
la realidad hay personas que tienen
reality,
más
there are
fácil
people that
acceso a
have
derechos
more
que otros. Es
easy
una realidad. Ahora,
access to
esta
the
es una
rights
realidad
is a
que tenemos
reality
que superar, porque la
we need to
universalidad
overcome
está
because the
implícita en el
universality
trabajo de los derechos
is
humanos.
in human rights.
Todos los derechos, sin
All
distinción,
human
son
rights
fundamentales
without
para
distinction are
el
central
bienestar
to
y
human
no hay una
well-being.
jerarquía o
And
distinción
there's
entre
the idea of a
los
hierarchy or
derechos
category distinction
cívicos,
between
los
civil and
derechos
political rights
económicos,
on the one
sociales o
hand and
culturales.
economic, social, and
Todos
cultural
reflejan
on
los
the other
elevados
hand does not
derechos de
reflect
la
the
vida humana y
realities
todos
and
tenemos que
richness of
los
human
cumplir de
experience.
manera
We need
unánime. Por eso hablamos
to
del
protect
derecho
them
a la
together.
indivisibilidad de los
That was
derechos
the
humanos. Entonces,
indivisibility of human
igualdad,
rights.
universalidad,
So equality,
indivisibilidad es muy importante.
universality,
Y ahí quiero
and indivisibility.
ya concluyendo y un
Uh,
poco sobre el tema de la
During my
universalidad de
presentation,
esta
to talk about the
declaración, muchas veces se
universal.
confunde los
The
derechos
many
humanos con los
times we see the
conceptos
human rights
del
is a
occidente, de
concept
países
of the West,
occidentales que no
of
reflejan
Western countries
otros
that do not
países, pero
reflect
vamos a mirar
others.
la historia y
But
vemos
if we
cómo
look
se
at
ha
the
desarrollado la
history,
legislación y los
how this declaration
derechos
was
de
drafted
envejecimiento
and the
que
agreements that were
van con la
followed
declaración, que son 10
based
tratados
on the declaration that there are 10
vinculantes de
treaties
los derechos humanos que han
that have to
sido
do with human rights
firmados por la
almost has been
mayoría de
signed.
los países, lo que
Most.
significa que los países
This
no solo
means
dicen que
that the
aceptan
countries
estas
not only
obligaciones y que
indicate that they
reportan
accept the
regularmente
obligations, but they
verifican que
regularly
los
report
mecanismos de Naciones Unidas
and
verifican cada 4 o
have
5 años la
allowed
implementación.
UN mechanisms to
La Declaración
verify.
de los Derechos Humanos
And
es el
the
origen de estos
declaration
tratados
is
y
the
hay
origins of
diferentes
these
tratados como la
treaties,
Convención
the
contra la
different treaties,
Tortura
the
y la
Convention
Convención
Against
para los
Torture,
Derechos del Niño, por ejemplo.
of
Estas
children's
convenciones
rights.
surgieron
These
con base
conventions
en lo que era el primer documento de
started based on the
esta,
first
esta
document,
declaración universal.
is this
Y ahí
universal
llegando a la
declaration,
universalidad
and coming
y el
to
hecho
the
de que la
universal
Declaración de Derechos es
characteristics
una declaración de todas y todos,
is
quiero
a
reiterar
declaration.
que
I would like to
los redactores
insist that
clave de
uh,
la redacción en
key
ese momento, de hecho, eran estados como
drafters
Chile,
were
India,
states like
Líbano
Chile,
y
India,
Filipinas,
Lebanon,
lo que
the
muchas veces
Philippines.
no se visibiliza. Los países latinoamericanos
The
que
Latin
tienen
American
sus
countries,
experiencias de
with their
esclavitud,
experience of
colonialismo
slavery,
y de
colonialism,
dominación extranjera, habían
or
luchado a
domination,
favor
have
de
pushed
medidas
for
internacionales de derechos
international
humanos
human rights
ya
measures
antes de
since
la Segunda Guerra
before
Mundial,
World
cuando
War
en los
II.
países europeos no hubo todavía el interés de
Well,
establecer
in the
tales
European countries, there was no interest
la defensa de los
in immigration.
derechos sociales y
The
económicos
advocacy
por
for
ejemplo,
social and economic
de
rights was
los
strongly
árabes
backed
que invocaban el
by
principio musulmán de
Arab
Zakat.
countries.
Filipinas, por ejemplo, se opuso
Philippines
enérgicamente
powerfully
contra
opposed
intentos de suavizar el artículo 5, que es el
watering
artículo
down Article
que viene
5
la tortura.
regarding
India y
torture,
Pakistán apoyaron
and then Pakistan
firmemente los
strongly
derechos
backed the rights
mujer.
of women.
Eleanor Roosevelt de Estados
Eleanor
Unidos,
Roosevelt from the US,
Hansa Mehta de India,
Hansa
de
Meza
Berlín
from
de
India, Minerva
Argentina,
Bernardino from the
Begum
Dominican
Shaista y
Republic,
Ikramula
and
de
Begum Shaista
Pakistán eran todos
Ikramula from
mujeres
Pakistan were
claves que
all
contribuyeron a
key
dar
women
vida a esta
that
declaración.
continue with
De
the
entre
reform of
otras
this
cosas,
declaration, that
garantizaron los
among
derechos
other
de las
things
mujeres que
guarantee
estamos hablando
women's
en
rights
este
that
texto.
are included
Eh,
in this text.
y esto es algo que quiero resaltar,
That I would
es
like to
un
highlight
documento que fue
that this is
producto
a
de
document
actores
that
de todo
was
el mundo, de mujeres y
the
hombres de
result
todo el
of
mundo,
men and
en
women
momentos diferentes en la historia
throughout the
y que
world
reflejan también
and
estas
reflect
realidades.
reality.
Hasta el día de hoy, la
Up
declaración
to today,
se
the
inspiró en
declaration
movimientos de liberación que
was
luchaban contra
inspired
la dominación
by
colonialista
liberation
y
movements
la
movement
violencia en todo el mundo. Y
and the
se
experience
utiliza
throughout the world,
mucho
and it
el
was
movimiento
used to
antiizquierda
defend them.
haitiano, por ejemplo,
The Haitian
es un
movement, for
movimiento que
example,
influenció mucho la creación
influenced
de esta
the
declaración.
drafting of
La
this
declaración también
declaration.
resuena con valores, por ejemplo, de África,
Declaration of value from
de
Africa
responsabilidad colectiva,
of
y la Carta
interdependence,
Africana de Derechos
cooperation, and
Humanos, que
collective
fue
responsibility.
adoptada hace
The
casi
African
40
Charter of
años
Human Rights
con
adopted almost
participación de
40
muchos
years
estados
with the
africanos, a
participation of
diferencia de
African
declaración,
states,
porque el momento que
like the
la Declaración
declarations,
Universal, muchos de los países
because
africanos
many of
no
these
eran
African
independientes
countries
todavía.
were not independent
Em,
yet.
esta Carta Africana refleja los
This
mismos
African
derechos que la
Charter reflects
Declaración
the
y ha
same
conseguido
rights of the
derechos que
Declaration and new
aún
ones,
más
so
avanzados
it's
en este
even
sentido,
more
tienen muchos de
advanced
derechos que la
in
Declaración
terms
Universal.
of rights
Y
of the
la
Universal
Declaración
Declaration.
también, para ir más
And this
a los
declaration,
países árabes del
to
Medio
go more
Oriente, la
to
Declaración
the Middle East
resuena con
countries,
estas referencias coránicas de
resonates
la
with
dignidad
Quranic
humana,
reference to
la
human
moral
dignity,
universal, la
universal
justicia, la obligación de
mankind,
ayudar,
justice,
la sinceridad y la
relation to help
responsabilidad
those
hacia
in
los
need and
demás.
responsibility to future
Em,
generations.
Al momento de redactar la declaración,
Once the declaration was
se
drafted,
basaron mucho en constituciones y legislaciones
they
de
were
los
based
55 países,
in
y estos también se reflejaron
constitutional
al final en el
legislations of
texto final
55 countries that were reflected in the final
de esta declaración.
draft of this declaration.
Hablando un poco de los logros
Speaking about the
qué fue el
achievements
significado de esta
and what
declaración,
was the
quiero
significance of
reiterar
this
que la
declaration, I would
Declaración
like to
Universal de los Derechos Humanos
indicate that
ha
the
inspirado
Universal
muchos
Declaration of
avances en
Human
los
Rights
derechos
has
humanos y
inspired
ha sentado la
remarkable
base
progress in
de lo
human
que
rights
hoy en día
and
tiene
laid
que
the
ser el marco
foundation
jurídico
for
y
the current
institucional
international human
internacional de
rights
los derechos
legal and
humanos.
institutional
En otras
framework.
palabras,
In
dio
other words,
nueva vida
brought
a
new
muchos
life
movimientos
to
activistas
these
en pro de los
movements
derechos humanos, de los trabajadores,
for
por ejemplo,
workers'
para
rights
acabar con muchas formas de
to end up with many
discriminación
forms of
por sexo,
discrimination on the
raza,
basis of sex, race,
religión,
religion,
condición de inmigrante,
migrant
discapacidad
status,
o cualquier otra
ability, or
condición.
any other.
La declaración contribuyó también a dar
Help
forma
to
a las
shape
constituciones de muchos
institutions
países
of
en
many
muchas
countries
regiones.
across regions.
Será en 1948
In
la aprobación
1948,
de esta declaración, la
this
gran
declaration,
ola de descolonización y
the
creación de nuevos
large
estados
wave of
en Oriente,
decolonization and creation of
la
new states,
fundación en
especially
los
in
50,
Africa,
60,
in
y ahí esta
50s and
declaración
60s.
fue una inspiración para
This was
muchas
an
otras
inspiration for
instituciones.
many of these
Em,
constitutions.
y de esta manera
And this way,
contribuyó también a la
they
creación
help
del Estado de
build
Derecho
the
imparcial,
rule of law
transparente y
institutions that
accesible.
are impartial, transparent,
La
and accessible.
declaración misma fue la
The
base de muchas
declaration
reformas en
was
países
the basis of
y
many
ha contribuido
reforms in countries and
enormemente en temas de
contributed to
educación,
major progress
sanidad
in
y en la
education,
protección
healthcare, and
social en diferentes
health
países
protection
del mundo. Sobre todo ha
throughout the
demostrado
world.
que cuando hay más libertad,
Demonstrated
las
that when
decisiones
there's greater
políticas
freedom,
están más
political
ancladas en la voluntad
decisions are more
popular.
securely
En otras
anchored
palabras,
on
hay
the will
mayor
of the
estabilidad
people,
política y hay
more
más
political
democracia. Los
stability.
derechos humanos y la democracia están
National human rights
inextricablemente vinculados.
are
El derecho
linked to
internacional
this.
de los derechos humanos,
National
la
human rights
declaración, pero también los
law
tratados que siguieron
and the
después, los
treaties that
tratados
follow,
internacionales que existen a nivel de Naciones Unidas, pero también a nivel, por ejemplo, interamericano. Aquí
but
tenemos
also at the
la mención
inter-American
de
level
varios
in other
tratados
regions
que
and
surgieron
many
de
other
la
treaties
Organización de Estados Americanos. Todo este
from the
conjunto de
Organization
derecho
of American
internacional
States
sigue evolucionando para
all
abordar
continues to
siempre
evolve
nuevas
to
cuestiones,
address
incluidas
a new
cuestiones
range of
emergentes,
issues, including
como son, por
emerging
ejemplo,
ones,
la situación
such as the
de los
rights
derechos de las personas mayores,
for older
el derecho a
people,
un medio
older
ambiente
persons,
limpio,
the right to a
sano
clean,
y
healthy, and
sostenible,
sustainable
o el
environment,
derecho al agua,
the
al
right to water,
saneamiento o el
sanitation,
derecho a la alimentación.
right to food.
Siendo muy transparente y
Being
honesto en
transparent
cómo ha sido
and
el avance
honest
de la
with
temática de los derechos humanos en las últimas décadas, tenemos que
the
también
progress of
reconocer
human
muchos
rights
fracasos
in
en
the
los
last
derechos humanos
decades. There have been also many human
desde la
rights
adopción de
failures
la declaración.
since the
Esto
adoption
no
of this
significa que la
declaration.
declaración
It
no
doesn't mean that
funcionó,
the
pero
declaration didn't
significa que
work,
no se han hecho
but it
los
means
esfuerzos
that we have made them
efectivos para integrar y hacer
ineffective efforts
realidad a
make
estos
a
derechos.
reality
Hubo
of
conflictos,
rights,
hubo
over
genocidio,
conflicts,
hubo violaciones horribles,
horrific
crímenes de lesa humanidad,
violations,
abusos e impunidad en
punities
muchos países del mundo,
in many
desde
countries throughout the
la
world.
esta declaración. Y por lo tanto, el
So
llamado del Alto Comisionado de las
we
Naciones Unidas para los Derechos
we
es
need
que este
to,
aniversario sirve
during
para
this
redoblar los esfuerzos,
anniversary,
para
we
que
need
los
to
países
redouble our efforts
responsables rindan
to bring
cuentas
the
y para que
perpetrators to
garanticen que
account,
los derechos humanos no solo se
ensure that
respeten
human rights
de
are
boquilla,
not
sino
just
que ocupan
lip
el lugar
service,
central que
but
les
the rightful
corresponde en todas
central
las políticas.
places in our policy.
La próxima dispositiva, por favor.
Next slide.
Para concluir,
To
quiero
conclude,
reiterar este
we would
punto
like
tan importante
to
que para
insist on
nosotros
this important
está central en
topic
la
for us,
declaración y lo que es también la
central
visión para
for
el
the
futuro que
declaration and the mission
surge de
for the
estas palabras
future that comes
que
from
tienen
these
ya
words
75 años.
that are celebrating
Cuando las
75 years.
instituciones estatales no
So when the
respetan los
state
derechos humanos,
institutions
el
do not
riesgo de
respect human
división y
rights, the risk
violencia
of division and violence
y
is
en el
high.
marco de esta división y violencia
This division and
tenemos mayores
violence
riesgos para violaciones
will
de
risk
derechos humanos. Hay
for
una
human
conexión
rights
cíclica
violations,
de verdad del no respeto a
the
los derechos
connection
humanos
of non-respecting the human rights and
en
their
las
impact
sociedades en todo el mundo.
in societies throughout the world.
El enfoque debe ser un trabajo de todos los
The
estados hacia
states
una mayor inclusión, una prosperidad más
can
sostenible, más justicia, dignidad y más libertad.
insist on
Y
greater
desde acá,
inclusion, more sustainable
internacionalmente, en los
prosperity, more
territorios,
justice, and more
unamos
dignity,
paz, unidad.
translated to more
Esto
development.
significa acoger las voces de la
Means
gente
to
en lugar
embrace the
de
voices
cerrar
of the people
ese recurso
instead of
tan
shutting
preciado
down that
que es
most
la sociedad
precious
civil y es
resource,
la voz
which
de la
civil
población
society
en cualquier democracia en el
in,
mundo. Los
in
derechos
any
humanos al
democracy throughout
final
the world.
son,
Human
en la
rights
opinión
are the
de las Naciones Unidas basado
opinion,
en la Declaración Universal, un camino hacia una mayor
the
estabilidad,
road
no hacia
for
una menor.
greater stability.
Garantizan que conflictos pueden
They
resolverse
ensure that
pacíficamente y
dispute
generan
can be
confianza
peacefully resolved and builds
en unas sociedades
confidence and
políticas y
loyalty,
económicas
as well as
prósperas.
thriving political and
Derechos
economic
humanos
situations.
no restringen a un
Human
Estado,
rights do
al
not
contrario,
restrict a state,
fomentan a
until they
que
promote
el Estado de
that
Derecho
the
sea más eficaz y
right
que
of
la
law,
democracia funcione mejor, lo que contribuye
democracy
a
works
menos
more, which
conflictos y más
contributes to less conflict
paz. La
and
manera
more
más
peace.
eficaz de crear
The most
sociedades
effective way
pacíficas,
to create
equitativas
societies
y
that are
respetuosas
full,
entre todos
squareable,
es, en realidad, construir justicia, dignidad
build
e igualdad
justice,
y
dignity,
desarrollo integrador para todos y todas en el
inclusive
mundo. Un
development
sistema que
for everyone,
protege todos
a
los derechos
system that
humanos. Y cuando
protects
hablamos
the
de
full
sistema,
human
hablamos
rights.
del marco
We thought about
nacional
the
que
system
establece
in the
leyes,
national frame
leyes y
that would be
políticas, pero
laws,
que también
policies,
iniciativas y
also
mecanismos existentes en las
initiatives
instituciones
and system
de-
mechanisms that
que permiten
participate
que
and allow
efectivamente todos
that
los
indeed
seres humanos tienen
all human
acceso
beings
a
have
estos derechos
to
fundamentales y que sobre
fundamental
todo
rights.
que se fomenta un diálogo
They
y
promote
que hay
dialogue,
cooperación y confianza entre
misunderstanding, and
los
trust.
estados en que actúen en
It,
consecuencia con el
that,
derecho
that act
internacional y acuerdos que los
in
países
international
mismos han
law,
elaborado
they
y trabajar
themselves have
conjuntamente para
drafted,
promover el bien común.
work
El
together
derecho humano,
for the common
el
good.
derecho internacional, no es
I mean,
algo que se le
the
obliga a los estados.
international right is
Los
not
estados
something that is
han
forced to the state to receive.
voluntariamente, primero,
Voluntarily
participado en la formulación de estos
participated
tratados
in
y
drafting these
segundo,
treaties, and
tomado
second,
decisión independiente
make the
de
independent
firmar
decision.
y ratificar estos
Signing
tratados.
and
Esto
ratifying these
significa
treaties
tomarlos como los
means
adoptarlos, hacerlos parte de
adopting
nuestro
them,
derecho interno
they
y
being
comprometernos
part of the
a seguirlos.
internal law
Ningún
and
país está
need to
obligado a
follow them.
firmar
No
un
country
tratado
is forced to
internacional.
sign
Es
an
la decisión
international treaty.
voluntaria de cada país. Y
Voluntary
esto es
decision of
muy importante cuando hablamos de estos
important
tratados
when we talk
internacionales
about
y
this
del rol que tienen también
international
los
treaty,
mecanismos internacionales de protección de los
international
derechos
mechanism
humanos.
for
Así que
of
quiero
human rights.
concluir
So I would
agradeciéndole
like to
mucho el
conclude by
tiempo y
thanking
esta
you very much for
pequeña
your time
viaje por el
and this small
tiempo y por los diferentes
travel
países.
at
Me
different
pareció
countries.
importante para
I
poder
think it is
renovar
important
lo que es de verdad
to
nuestro
renew
compromiso al
what
respecto de los
is the
derechos humanos,
commitment and respect
que
for
para
human
mí como
beings.
oficina del alto
For us,
comisionado
as
es
a
un momento muy
High
importante
Commissioner
ahora
office, is
en
a
el
very important
aniversario
moment
75
celebrating the 75th
de esta
anniversary
declaración.
of this
Hubo el día lunes de esta
declaration.
semana un gran
This
evento en
Monday,
Ginebra
we had
donde
a major event in
representantes de estados
Geneva
de todo el mundo
with
se
many
han
heads
unido
of states throughout the
y
world have come
se han comprometido
and have
públicamente
publicly
a
committed
doblar sus esfuerzos para la
to
implementación
redouble their efforts
de
for
la
the
declaración
implementation
y
of
a su
this
vez llevar
declaration,
estos
and
mensajes
also
a
take
incrementar
their
la visibilidad de lo
messages
que es
and increase the
no un
visibility
documento viejo
that
de
is
los
not
años
an old
70, pero un
document of the
documento vivo
40s
que debe ser la base para
life
un
document that should
futuro
be the basis
equitativo y próspero
for a
para todos
prosperous and
nosotros.
equitative
Muchísimas gracias.
beings. Thank you.
Muchas gracias,
Thank you very
estimado
much.
doctor Fritz,
The
por
doctor
una magnífica
made a wonderful
presentación,
presentation,
un recuento de lo
has
importante que es la
told us
Declaración
about the
Universal de
importance
los
of this
Derechos
universal
Humanos, que ahora es
declaration of
más
human rights.
vigente que nunca,
It's more
debido a las
current than
actividades
ever
globales que tenemos
and the global challenges that we have in their application. We are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in which you remember us is not just an historical document, but it's also life testimony for humankind. All human beings are equal for the rights, and all the rights are important. Today, we'd also like to remind you of an essential resolution to guarantee human rights. This resolution that has to do with the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Resolution was approved in the General Assembly in July 2022. And its preamble, many other instruments that we just mentioned, it reaffirms the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Vienna Declaration and Program of Action. And it recalls that the declaration made important progress, such as the Stockholm Declaration on Human Environment and the Rio Declaration on Environment and the Development, among other international human rights treaties. This resolution reaffirms the agenda entitled Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which adopted 17 Sustainable Development Goals and Universal Goals. Today, we have many instruments that reaffirm that states have the obligation to respect, protect, and promote human rights, including in all activities aimed at addressing environmental challenges. That is why today, for the Andean Health Organization, it's important to promote the exchange of experiences that are an example for each person and for the region. And therefore, we would like to provide a space to talk about experience and to learn about a significant experience that, in addition to defend human rights, defends the hope of acting in coherence of a defense of a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as a human right. Now we would like to welcome the participation of Dr. Claire Donaldson, the co-executive director of the international NGO Lead Exposure Elimination Project, Oxford, UK. Claire leads program supporting 16 countries on 3 continents to eliminate lead paint from their markets. She is also a trustee of Sustiva, a nonprofit organization working to increase the uptake of vaccines to combat vaccine preventable diseases, for example, in India. He holds a PhD in Earth Sciences. Go ahead, dear Dr. Claire.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Can you see my slides? Fantastic. Good day, everyone.
Podemos verles. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for the invitation to speak. My name's Dr. Claire Donaldson, and as mentioned, I'm the co-executive director of LEAP. LEAP is a member of the Global Alliance to Eliminate Lead Paint, which is a joint WHO UN Environment Programme working worldwide. And I'll be speaking about this little known but very large problem globally, a child's right to grow up in a home free from sources of lead poisoning. Lead is an extremely toxic metal, and one way to think about why is that it mimics calcium and other metal ions that serve essential functions in pretty much every part of the body.
Hello. Hello.
And it interrupts many different processes that affects pretty much every organ system in the body. And because of this, it increases the risk of kidney disease, anemia, fetal health problems, behavioral disorders, and many more. And it also causes an increased likelihood of cardiovascular disease and mortality from cardiovascular disease. And that could be as high as a relative risk of 1.5, or so 50% more likely to have cardiovascular disease for average levels of lead exposure in low and middle income countries. Now, lead, as mentioned, can get to every part of the body in the bloodstream, and then it's deposited in people's bones and can be released from people's bones constantly throughout their life back into the body. In some periods in someone's life, that release rate could increase. So when women are pregnant, for example, their bones will release more lead as the baby grows, and that lead can then be absorbed by the baby. So a mother can actually pass on lead that they've accumulated through their lifetime to a baby. It's particularly dangerous when children are very young and their brains are still developing, because this is such a complex and delicate process. So when the neurons are forming in the very early years, the lead can interfere with that process, causing permanent brain damage. The average child in a low or middle income country has a blood lead level of about 5 micrograms per deciliter. And that's enough to reduce their educational attainment because of the effects on their brain. A recent analysis showed that that blood lead level would be equivalent to losing 1 whole year of schooling. And this effect, in turn, will affect their future earning potential, and so lead to lost income and lost GDP. So the estimates on this slide of GDP loss are only through the effects of cognitive development. So it doesn't count any of the health effects mentioned. So we're really seeing huge losses in income globally because of this issue. Because lead affects the developing brain, it can also affect people's impulse control. So there's good evidence that the increase in violent crime in the USA in the 1960s and 1970s was caused in part by the increase in lead in the environment due to leaded gasoline. It's estimated that 1 in 3 children worldwide have lead poisoning, which is a completely staggering statistic. And this goes unseen because lead is an invisible toxin. And in addition to the effects I've already mentioned, it's thought that this causes 22 million disability adjusted life years. So this is equivalent to 22 million years of healthy life lost around the world because of lead poisoning. And most relevant to this webinar is that lead in our homes and in our communities is a violation of our rights to live in a healthy environment. It's damaging people's health around the world, children's future potential, and is disproportionately affecting people in low and middle income countries. There are many sources of lead exposure. To show you a few on this slide, the unsound recycling of lead acid batteries, lead pipes, mining and smelting operations, spices, cookware. But at LEAP, we're particularly focused on paint. Lead paint is a major and widespread source of lead exposure worldwide, and it's completely unnecessary to put lead in paint. So this is something that definitely can be solved. I wanted to share some recent data from the Andean region on potential sources of lead exposure. This analysis was recently conducted by an organization called Pure Earth, and they bought various consumer products from markets and shops in 25 countries around the world, and these included Bolivia, Colombia, and Peru. So this table shows the proportion of samples that they took that were found to be above safe reference levels for lead content. And ceramic foodware, this is ceramic dishes, bowls, and other types of pottery. So sometimes lead glazes are used, and if these aren't fired to a high enough temperature, this can leach into the food. Then metallic foodware, this is like aluminium pots and pans. If these are made from melted down scrap metal, then that could also contain lead. And cosmetics, these are things like eyeliners and lipsticks, again, that sometimes can contain lead. And just to point out a few results, you can see worryingly high numbers, particularly in ceramics and metallic foodware in all three countries here. This is really very concerning, and more research is needed to investigate this. I'll finish my presentation by telling you a little bit more about our work at LEAP. So lead in paint is still being manufactured today. So people can still buy lead paints and put them on their walls in homes, schools, and hospitals. And our 5-step process is how we support countries to end the availability of lead paint on their market. And so this means we hope our work is going to be stopping this source of exposure, protecting people for decades to come. Here you can see some photos of our work with partners around the world, in Ghana, Pakistan, Bolivia, and Zimbabwe. We conduct studies to generate data on the amount of lead paint available in a country. We also support government to introduce and implement regulation banning this hazardous product. And we provide free technical assistance to manufacturers to support them in switching to lead-free raw materials and helping them find alternative sources. France banned some lead paints for interior and exterior use all the way back in 1909. And many countries introduced comprehensive regulation in the 1970s. But unfortunately, lead paint is still only regulated in 48% of countries worldwide. Peru, Colombia, and Ecuador do have regulation on the books, but Bolivia does not. But I would still urge consumers to demand from paint sellers and paint manufacturers to show that their paints are lead-free, because time and time again, we've seen through our work that lead paints could still be being sold on the market in countries even with regulation. These are the countries that LEAP is supporting in our work, and we're eager to extend our support in the Andean region further. So thank you so much for inviting me to speak today and for listening to my presentation.
Muchas gracias, querida doctora Claire. Magnífica presentación, muy interesante.
Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. You talk about the impacts of lead, and these are severe and alarming and related with anemia, growth retardation, cardiac diseases, stroke, preterm delivery, mental health, learning disabilities, death year after year. Lead is definitely toxic, and the exposure comes from many sources: cosmetic, pipes, electronic, and kitchen appliances. One of the most important sources is the lead paint. And you told us that more than 100 years know about this, and therefore it is a priority to support countries and to the industry to end this developability of paint with lead and joint efforts to guarantee the right of life and health of all people. Once again, thank you so much, and please stay in the room. We have many comments and questions from the audience that after the presentation of Guillermo, we will address. Now we would like to welcome Dr. Guillermo Olmedo. He's the program director of the NGO Lead Exposure Elimination Program. He's a medical doctor by profession with a focus on development and research and previous experience in the Bolivian pharmaceutical industry, and also works in public health impact projects. He has a degree in microbiology in the US. Go ahead, dear Dr. Guillermo, you have the space.
Muy bien, muchísimas gracias, estimada Berta.
Thank you very much, dear Berta, Dr. Maria del Carmen. Thank you very much for the invitation to the Andean Health Organization for my presentation. Also, Dr. Fritz Boehmer from the UN and Dr. Claire. It's a pleasure to share with you this seminar.
Sí, perfecto, gracias. El día de hoy,
Today,
bueno, enfocando un poco más
I want to focus
sobre el plomo en
on
pintura y la
lead
exposición,
in
problemas y desafíos
paint
que tenemos de
and the
exposición
challenges that we have
por plomo,
with these
voy a dar una
lead
ponencia
contamination
más
sources.
enfocada en
I will focus my
lo que
presentation
la misión de LIP
on the
y
mission of LEAP
principalmente LIP
that
es
focuses
prevenir la
to
exposición
prevent
del plomo
the
a
exposure
los niños que,
to
como
lead
hemos visto en la
in
presentación de la doctora
children,
Claire,
especially that as we've seen in Dr.
quienes
Claire's
más
presentation,
afectados
are
están
the ones that are
y
most
obviamente afecta
affected,
su
and it
derecho
affects
humano a la
their
salud
human
y un
right
medio
to
ambiente
health
saludable.
in a sustainable environment.
Como ya fue explicado
As it has been
la escala del
explained
problema
previously,
de la
the
exposición del
scale
plomo
of the problem
es enorme.
to
Se
lead
estima
exposure
que
is
UNICEF y
enormous.
resultados del 2020
According to UNICEF from
aproximadamente
2020,
815 millones de
approximately
niños
815
tienen
million children
concentraciones de plomo
have
por
lead
encima de
in
los
blood
5
levels
microgramos por
over the
decilitro, que
level of
es
5
el punto
micrograms per
donde se ha
deciliter, which
estimado
is the
que se
estimated
considera
cutoff
ya
point that
necesario
is
tomar
considered
acción, se
to take
justifica la
some
acción
action
para generar regulación
to
en favor
generate
de la
regulations
exposición del plomo de
against
las
the
distintas
lead
fuentes.
exposure from different sources.
Específicamente, el plomo
Typically speaking,
se
the
cree
lead
que afecta aproximadamente el
affects
1% de la
approximately
carga mundial de
1%
enfermedades
of the
y
global
representa
burden of disease
aproximadamente una
and
pérdida de
represents
$1 billón
1 billion
anualmente
US
a
dollars
nivel
of
población
loss
mundial
annually
debido a la pérdida o la
due
falta de
to the
ingresos que
loss of lack of
estos
income
representan para
that these
la población.
represent.
Como ya tenía conversado la doctora Claire,
As Dr.
existen
Claire indicated, there are many
como ya
sources
había,
of
ya
lead
había
exposure
hablado, la pintura,
and paint
las baterías,
and
pero específicamente LIP se
batteries,
ha concentrado
but LEAP
en la
has
pintura.
focused
¿Y por qué?
specifically in paint.
Porque es
And
una
why?
fuente de
Well,
exposición
it
que
is because
primeramente no es
a source
necesaria.
of
El
exposure
plomo es una materia prima
where they
utilizada
don't need
para tratar
lead
cosas específicas,
This is used for three specific things in paint industry: provide color, help in the paint drying, and anti-corrosive effect. However, there are other raw materials that can substitute lead, and therefore, through regulation, it has been well documented and published that we can decrease the exposure to lead in paint in many countries. So, as we were discussing before, lead paint can be removed by complying with regulations. Lead is not a necessary ingredient in paint. There are lead-free ingredients available. There is a need the enforcement of mandatory national standards that the LEAP that we're going to introduce later has some models and guidelines to continue with these regulations in order to reduce lead poisoning in children. And this collaborates in these SDGs, which is number 1, 3, and 12, in no poverty, good health and well-being, and responsible consumption and production, and complies with these SDGs by eliminating the exposure of lead in paint. As we heard before, lead paint is unregulated in more than 71 countries worldwide. The current data from 2023 come from WHO, where in Latin America we see there are some countries in Latin America, among them my countries. I'm a proud Bolivian that doesn't have data on regarding the regulation in our country, but there are countries who have no regulation, mostly in Africa and in Asia. We also know that lead paint can be purchased in many countries. As Dr. Claire mentioned, not only in countries who don't have regulation, but sadly, it's present in some countries that do have regulation, and therefore there's an urge that people be aware of this in order to prevent the exposure to this product. Currently, countries with regulations with lead paint, we have 84 countries worldwide that represent 43% of countries worldwide. This means that most of the countries don't have regulations against lead. And talking about Latin America, 7 of South American countries, these are Peru, Ecuador, Argentina, Colombia, Brazil, Uruguay, and Chile, do have regulations of lead paint. Bolivia and Venezuela, according to this report from WHO on 2021, do not have data reports, and Paraguay and Suriname have no regulations so far. The Alliance Against Lead in Paint, known as GAIL, is a partnership that provides several resources that can be used by the Ministry of Health and the Environment for productive development in order to continue with a regulation that can be controlled and based on international guidelines. In these cases, we have technical guidelines for lead paint reformulation for the industry. We also have the model law and guidance on regulation in the country and lead paint compliance and enforcement guidance. The model law and guidance for lead paint regulation is what we are trying to do with our active collaboration with different countries. So the government decides the implementation of the regulation against lead. In the specific case of South America, we had major progress with the Ministry of Health of the Bolivia plurinational state with a national program of health and environmental management, where they carry out an initial study in the past year to see the availability of paint with lead in the market, and we are working continuously. And we thank the effort of the Ministry of Health in that process of the plurinational state in promoting a regulation against lead in paint. This is just beginning, but it's something very encouraging, and we hope that we can make it a reality in 2024. As I mentioned before, there are steps or basic steps to follow for lead paint regulation, and these are based on three steps to identify a commitment in the stakeholders to support the lead paint law. Can be the different ministries that should be involved with the regulation, and of course the collaboration and participation of the industry and of the civil society. Number two is the development of a lead paint law, which we have guidelines model to be followed with that drafting. And number three, of course, raising awareness to promote the development of a law on lead. Dr. Claire mentioned how we support countries to eliminate lead-based paint. We carry out a painting study. Plus, we collaborate with implementation or collaborate with the government, creating awareness and supporting manufacturers with technical support and the supply of raw materials that are free of lead, and to collaborate with the implementation and to identify and raise awareness with paint manufacturers, support manufacturers to switch to lead-free paint, future testing of lead levels in paint. The paint studies generate country-specific evidence on lead paint prevalence. Moment we have carried out 12 painting studies free of charge in 12 countries, where we have made a market analysis, have benchmark data on paint industry and consumer preferences and the supply chain that exists, which is important to identify it and collaborate during the entire process. With regards to sampling, we do accredited test data on lead concentration in paint, sending these studies and results to external laboratories, specifically the Laboratory in Occupational Health in Wisconsin that has certification so that the data are reliable. And of course, we have our commitment to industry partnerships, government focus on reformulation and regulation with lead-free material. And well, to conclude my presentation and thanking once again for your time, I will leave you some questions. Some may be rhetorical, or maybe we can discuss later about the reality of each country. All are following us today can take into consideration what progress have been made in the implementation and enforcement of standards regarding lead in paint in your country. What barriers have you faced in implementing and enforcing these standards? This individual for each country, and we can also, and it will be good to share best practices and experiences in addressing lead in paint. Next slide. Thank you. This is my contact information. If you're interested in contacting me, we're always available to help. Again, thank you for allowing me this presentation. Thank you very much, my dear Guillermo. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. Explain the scale of
que
the
la
problem. It seems
población
to be small,
de
but it's
215
very large.
millones de niños
815
con
million
rayoplasma
children
o en sangre y
with
ya
blood
vimos todas las
lead
consecuencias
levels, and we've
de
seen
esa
all the
enfermedad.
consequences
La
that this
cultura
can
como no
generate.
se puede eliminar
That pain
haciendo
can be eliminated by
regulaciones.
enforcing
Esto
regulations.
se vincula con lo
And
que les
this is linked
decía
to
al
what
inicio del
we were
webinar el doctor Fries.
heard from Dr.
Tenemos la
Fritz at the
Declaración
beginning of the
Universal de
webinar.
los
We have the
Derechos
Universal
Humanos y los
Declaration of
desafíos que
Human
es
Rights
cumplir
and the challenges
esta
that is to
normatividad.
comply with the
Asimismo, nos comparte
regulations.
pasos clave
We also
a
share
seguir para
key
la
resources
preservación
and
del
steps to
empleo.
follow for
El
less
doctor
regulation.
Calle al inicio del
Dr.
webinar
Calle, at the start of the
dijo,
webinar,
bienvenidas todas las
mentioned
personas
welcome
que
all the
nos
people that have
acompañan en la lucha
joined
contra
us
la peor
in
enfermedad, la
fighting
indiferencia.
against the
No
worst
podemos
disease,
ser
indifference.
indiferentes
We
a los
cannot be
problemas.
indifferent
Todas las
to these
acciones, por
issues.
pequeñas que nos
All the
parezcan,
actions, no
son
matter
muy
how small they
importantes.
seem
El
to be, are
aborto. La
very
Asamblea General
important
de las
contributions.
Naciones
The
Unidas
UN General
el 18 de
Assembly
julio de
in
2022
July
declaró que todas
28
las
of
personas
2022
tienen
declared
derecho a
that
un medio
every
ambiente
people have a
saludable
right
y
to a
debemos
healthy environment,
redoblar
and
todos
we
los
have to
esfuerzos
redouble all
para
the
garantizar que
efforts to
todas las
guarantee
personas del
that all
planeta
the people
puedan
from the
acceder a
planet
un medio
can have
ambiente
access
limpio,
to a clean,
saludable y
healthy,
sostenible.
and
El
sustainable
propósito de este
environment.
webinar
Remember that
es
this
para conmemorar la
webinar is to
Declaración
celebrate
Universal de los
the
Derechos
Universal
Humanos.
Declaration of
Todas las
Human Rights.
personas estamos
All
llamadas
the
a
persons
defender los
are called
derechos
to
humanos.
defend
Todas
human
tenemos un
rights.
papel
We all have
importante
a
que
significant
desempeñar.
role to play.
Vamos a pasar al
Now we're
agradecimiento a
going
todas las
to
personas
thank all
conectadas
the
del
persons that are
Ministerio de
connected from
Salud,
the
de la
ministries of health,
academia, de
the
diversas
academic
entidades y
areas, and
organizaciones
various
sociales de
entities and
Argentina,
social
Bolivia,
organizations
Chile,
from Argentina,
Colombia, Cuba,
Bolivia, Chile,
Ecuador,
Colombia, Cuba,
España,
Ecuador, Spain,
Guatemala, Inglaterra,
Guatemala,
México, Nicaragua,
UK,
Paraguay,
Mexico,
Perú,
Nicaragua,
Uruguay,
Paraguay,
Venezuela,
Peru,
entre muchos
Uruguay,
otros.
Venezuela,
Muchas
among many
gracias
others.
a todos y a
Thank you
todas
very
por
much
los
to all
comentarios, las
for the
preguntas
comments
que han
and
realizado.
questions
Les pido,
being sent.
por favor, el
I will
doctor
ask
Fritz,
you, please,
encender
Dr.
su
Fritz,
cámara.
to
Vamos a
start your
pasar,
video.
por favor, a un
We're going
diálogo
to
para dar
start this
respuesta
dialogue
a
to
inquietudes
respond
planteadas por las y
to
los
some questions
participantes.
sent by the audience.
Muchas gracias. Hay un
Thank you.
comentario
There
de
is
uno de los
a comment
participantes
from one
en
of the
relación con el
participants
libro
in
de Edward
relation
Saden,
this
La era del
seven book,
individuo
The
tirano, el
Era
fin
of the
del mundo
Siren
común.
Individual,
Y
The End of
nos
a Common
hace
World.
un comentario muy
And he,
interesante en relación con
an
idea de
interesting
este
comment
libro.
with
Dice
regards to
que
this
cada día
book,
se están dando
where
cambios
we
crecientes en la
see growing
desconfianza,
changes
en
in
las
the
instancias de
mistrust,
poder y el
in the
rechazo
levels of
de
power, and
las
the rejection
democracias
to
y a
democracy
instrumentos
and to
importantes como la
important
Declaración
instruments such
Universal de los
as the
Derechos
Universal
Humanos, entre
Declaration of
otros.
Human Rights, among
También nos
others.
habla de
They
una gran
also mention
insatisfacción
a large
y sobre todo también de
insatisfaction,
que no se creen
and
en los
they
proyectos
don't
colectivos.
believe
Me
in
gustaría que
collective
por
projects.
favor ustedes
Could
nos
you
hagan
please
una reflexión
make
en relación
a
con estas
comment on
características
these
de la población
characteristics
actual:
of the current
atomización de
population,
los sujetos,
the
señalación
atomization of
de
subjects,
raperos, individuos
the
aislados, cerrados
isolated
a veces a sus
individuals
propias
that are
opiniones
en-
y además
close in
en
their own
procesos
opinion
de
and in
despolitización?
process of
¿Cómo motivar
depolitization?
para
How
que haya
to motivate
un mayor
them to
movimiento
have
de la
a greater
población en
movement
general
by
hacia
the population
propuestas
in general
de
towards
defensa de los
proposals
derechos, de
of defending the
iniciativas
rights
comunes
and
que de
common
una u
initiatives
otra manera
that
inciden
one
en
way
el
or the other
bienestar
would have
de la
incidence in
población?
welfare of the
Les
population?
cedo, por favor, la palabra en el orden que hicieron
Please
las intervenciones.
respond in the order of the present.
Muchísimas gracias por
Thank you
esta
very
pregunta que
much
por sí
for
misma es
this
una
question
reflexión, yo pienso,
that is a
más
reflection in
allá sobre
itself
la temática que hemos discutido hoy.
about the topic that we have discussed
Diría
today.
que
I would
el
say
aniversario de la Declaración
that
Universal
the
de Derechos
anniversary
Humanos
of the
para
Universal Declaration is an
reconectarnos
opportunity
también con esos
to
principios que
reconnect
tú
with these
justamente
principles
hablabas,
that
de
we
la
mentioned,
universalidad, de la
but
indivisibilidad de estos
universality,
derechos y que
indivisibility of these rights,
efectivamente
and that
momentos
indeed
donde nos
there have
parece
been
que
moments where
estamos
it
cada uno
seems
en
that
nuestra
we
burbuja,
are
en
one
nuestros
isolated
proyectos,
in
y es
our
difícil
bubble,
abrirse
and it's
a nuevas
very difficult to
perspectivas,
open to
es
other
clave
perspectives.
primero
It is key first
enfocarse en
to
esa
focus
universalidad, en
on
que
this
los derechos humanos por ser
universality.
humanos,
Thus,
en
these rights
la
are because we're
igualdad
human
que
beings,
tenemos todos, que
and
somos
the
todos
equality that
iguales
we'll
y
have, we're all
dos,
equal
diferentes situaciones, y tres, la
under
empatía,
different
la
situations, and
empatía
thanks to
también
the
enfocándonos
empathy
en los
that is very
sentimientos tantos
important.
de las otras personas.
put in the shoes of the
hace
other
en
people
esas experiencias reflexionar sus
and
propias ideas
reflect on your
y
own
los desafíos
ideas
que cada uno y
and the
cada una de
challenges
diferentes
that
partes del mundo
each one has in
enfrentamos.
different
Tener en
parts of
cuenta
the
que los
world.
derechos humanos son
At the end,
una base muy
human
buena
rights are a
justamente
very good
para fomentar
basis
estos
and
diálogos
foundation
tan
to promote these
importantes para
dialogues that are
cambiar
so
opinión
important
y
to
encontrar
exchange
soluciones a los
ideas and
grandes
find
desafíos que estamos
solutions
enfrentando
to
en el
these
día de hoy.
challenges that we're facing today.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you
Adelante,
very
por
much.
favor,
Go,
Guillermo.
go
Ah,
ahead,
Claire, perdona,
Claire.
Claire.
Thank you. I can speak to our own experiences through our work. We have found that bringing all stakeholders together, so government, industry, civil society, consumers, everyone, to increase their understanding and awareness of this issue and make sure their voices are heard on the path forward is very important. But luckily, because there is a solution to this problem, it's completely surmountable. And that can be reinforced by good data collection on the problem that's shared with everybody, again, to increase people's awareness and understanding of the issue. And through that, there is a path forward on this to improve for everybody's right to their healthy environment. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, conforme igual
Well,
a lo que menciona el doctor
similar
la
to
doctora
what
Claire,
they both
considero
mentioned,
yo que
I
este proceso
consider that this
de un medio ambiente saludable
process of a
es
healthy
un derecho humano
environment
y
is a
deberá
human
ser
right
seguido
and must
por la
be
concientización de absolutamente
followed
todos
with
los que estamos.
awareness of everyone.
Hoy en día tenemos la capacidad
Today have the
tecnológica para identificar
technological capacity
prácticamente
to
qué
identify
situaciones nos ponen en riesgo a nuestra salud
situations put
y
us at
tendrá que ser
risk
no
in our
solamente
health,
la
and it will have
concientización
to be not only the
de la
awareness
sostenibilidad
and
del
sustainability
desarrollo en nuestro medio ambiente, sino
of the
también que el
development
gobierno
of an environment, but
puedan
also
tomar
the
en
governments
cuenta
should
estos pasos a
take
seguir
these
para
steps
implementar
into
regulaciones que
consideration
puedan
to
ser beneficiosas.
implement regulations that can be useful
Para mí es
and
muy
feasible.
importante tomar en cuenta
For
que
me, it's very
muchos de los
important
países que han logrado la
that many of
regulación
these countries that
o
have
que han
achieved that
implementado
regulation,
normativas
have
han
implemented
logrado
standards,
efectivamente
have
y
been able to
eficazmente
achieve
disminuir las concentraciones
a
de plomo
decrease
en
in the
pintura
concentration of lead
y en
in paint
sangre
and
en
also in
niños y
blood of
adultos.
children and
Entonces es algo
adults.
que
So
debemos
this is
apostar
something
como
that
un
we should
derecho
consider
humano
a
prácticamente.
universal right.
Gracias.
Health. Thank
Muchas
you.
gracias. Esta
Thank you.
pregunta, por favor, es para el doctor
This
Fritz.
question is for
En
Dr.
realidad
Fritz.
son varias preguntas.
There are several
Una, por
questions.
favor, una reflexión
Would
sobre
you
la
please
articulación
reflect
de los
on
derechos
the
humanos y los
coordination of
derechos de
human
la
rights
infancia,
and
niños, niñas y
children's in
adolescentes?
rights?
Y también, por
And
favor,
also, could you
el
please
tema ahora, la
talk
diversidad, la
about
equidad, la inclusión.
diversity, equity, and
¿Qué
inclusion?
reflexión nos puede hacer
What
sobre
comments
estas
could
tres
you do
dimensiones tan
about
importantes,
these
diversidad,
important dimensions:
equidad e inclusión?
diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Muchísimas gracias
Thank
por
you
esta
very much
pregunta.
for this question.
Pasando aviones aquí en Lima,
There's
donde
some
estoy.
planes flying over
Entonces,
me in Lima.
muchísimas
Sorry
gracias
for the noise.
por estas preguntas muy pertinentes.
These are very
Respecto al
significant
derecho
questions
de los niños,
regards to children's
el
rights.
derecho del niño
The rights
es
of children,
central
the right of
y una
children
parte
are
central de la
essential
Declaración
and are at the
de los
core
Derechos
of
Humanos
the
de
Declaration of
1946,
Human Rights in
justamente
1948.
no se limita a los
It
derechos
doesn't
solo del
limit
adulto
to the
o solo
rights
del
of the
hombre, y
adults
había mucha
or
discusión al
men.
momento
And there
de
was many
redactar el
discussions
texto
when
si
drafting the text
qué es la terminología que se usa,
what
pero es el
terminology
primer
was going
documento
to
que
be used,
abarca los
but this is
derechos
the
de
first
todos
document that
y eso
includes
incluye
the
todos los
rights of
seres humanos,
everyone, and it includes all human beings
desde los niños, obviamente.
from
Segundo,
children on.
es que la Declaración
Number
Universal
two
fue la
is the
base de
Universal
la
Declaration
Convención
was the
de
basis
Derechos de
of
Niños de
the Convention of the
1948, el
Children's
documento más
Convention,
importante
the most
en materia de
important
derechos
document
humanos sobre el derecho del niño,
on
que
the children's
abarca
rights that
todos
covers
los derechos y obligaciones
all the
vis-a-vis los
rights
estados que tienen hacia la
of the
población de
states that
niños
have towards the
en sus
children's
territorios.
populations
Hay
in their
un grupo
territory.
muy importante, es el Comité del
We
Derecho
have
del
the
Niño, un comité de
Committee of
Naciones Unidas
the
que
UN
analiza
Children's
la
Rights Committee
situación
that
en los países
analyzes
de los
the
derechos de los niños
situation
y a su
of
vez
the situation of children,
controla esta
and also controls the implementation by the state. And it can even send individual reports or cases. So this is a central part of the human rights framework, and this is a good example or specific topic that came out from this Universal Declaration. Second question about dignity, diversity. This is also quite relevant when we talk about the declaration, because this precisely opened the space to have many national laws and policies to promote inclusiveness. For example, people with disabilities, with following international treaties, but also many national mechanisms policies to promote inclusion of people with disability. On the other hand, diversity, another plane.
Los otros que están aquí en Lima seguramente escuchan esto también, pero parece que las Fuerzas Armadas están volando.
We still say the armed forces are, the Air Force is flying on top of us.
Se escucha. En cuanto a la diversidad,
Now, with regards to
quería
diversity,
muchos avances
I would like to
por
indicate that any
LGBTI,
progress
por
made
ejemplo,
in
o
protection of
diversidad
the population
etnias,
or the
ha
ethnic
salido de la declaración,
defense
sea
came
a
out
nivel
from
de
this declaration,
tratados internacionales,
even
sea también
maybe
tratados
through
políticos
international
a
treaties
nivel nacional. Entonces,
or national
la
policies.
declaración
So
también ha sido el
the
origen
declaration
de
has also been the
procesos y nos
origin
recuerda
of these
lo que
processes and
durante
remind us
muchos años
that although it's
fue
a very old
nuestro
document,
cambios
it may be the
donde
basis
son muy
for
necesarios y
changes
obviamente
that
hay
are
mucho trabajo
very
pendiente
necessary,
del día
and
de hoy.
the struggle continues up to today.
Muchas gracias. Una
Thank you
pregunta, por favor, para la
for
doctora Clay
Dr.
en
Claire.
relación con, ¿existen mecanismos
The
para la
mechanisms
regulación del
to
plomo en los
regulate
productos
lead
exportados?
in products that are exported?
Is the question, what are the mechanisms to regulate exported paint?
Sí.
Yes.
So there are many ways a country could do it, but one way is to make sure that every licensed manufacturer in a country has some kind of certificate or declaration showing that their paints are lead-free, and the relevant regulatory authority ensures that every year that those licenses or certificates are up to date, and that their paints are compliant with the relevant legal limit, which is often 90 parts per million total lead content. And similarly, for any imported paint, it's often on the seller to show that paint that they are importing is similarly compliant with the local regulations. And the regulatory authority may have additional powers to test paint randomly on the market to again check that compliance has been met.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. And for Guillermo, we have a following question. How are the South American countries in terms of contributing to the monitor of lead levels in paint and other products in general?
Sí, bueno, los datos que tenemos
Well, the data that we currently have are based on the UN Program for the Environment of 2021. As I mentioned before, we have detected that 7 of the 12 countries in South America have regulations and standards with maximum allowed levels in lead of lead in paint, and each one moving at their own speed. There's some standards like Argentina and Brazil that have a 600 ppm. For example, Brazil a month ago has approved the update of that standard to 90 ppms. On the other hand, Colombia in 2020 made the implementation of the regulation against lead in paint and other sources, and it took almost 3 years for the implementation of specific standards for each one of the sources of lead exposure. So this year they will have to present their technical standards. And Peru in 2022 has been one of the countries that has already implemented a law and regulations. I don't remember the name of the law or the number of the law, but it regulates the 90 ppm through the Ministry of Health. So there major progress at government levels, of course, that also requires strong part in terms of enforcement of that regulation and make sure that that regulation is really applied and that the industries can comply with it, because this is a gradual process. They usually recommend that this can take 1 to 2 years so the industry can gradually make the switch in the education, collaborating with industry because they are partners and they are also interested in collaborating for a better world. Now, with regards to other products or food or its control, well, it varies from country to country. In this case, I have seen more, I've been more experienced with paint. Thank you very much. Now we're going to show a video to remind you that together we can visualize a future, a present, or a life where the rights of each people, each one are protected, where it is a reality for everyone in complying human rights.
También para recordar esta importante y bella celebración
And
de
also to remind you about this 75th anniversary celebration of human rights.
75 years ago, something remarkable happened on the global stage. The world united to adopt the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This powerful moment emerged from a turbulent era filled with wars, genocide, nuclear threats, and economic instability. Despite these challenges, nations came together to make a solemn promise to protect and advance the rights of every individual. In 1993, as the Cold War thawed and the Internet expanded rapidly, the Vienna Declaration and Programme of Action played a crucial role in reinforcing human rights principles. Both the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Vienna Declaration have been beacons of inspiration, igniting meaningful change worldwide. Human rights have become integral to governance and decision-making. Movements like Black Lives Matter, Me Too, Fridays for Future, indigenous activism, and women's protests have empowered individuals to stand up for their rights and challenge injustice. Young people especially have embraced the language of human rights to voice their concerns, and some countries' courts have held wrongdoers accountable, even recognizing the right to a healthy environment. The idea of a human rights-based economy is gaining traction, offering a way to tackle global inequalities and aligning with the Sustainable Development Goals. Yet, human rights violations persist in many parts of the world, often without consequences. Challenges like climate change, conflict, hate speech, the shrinking space for civic engagement, and the governance of new technologies require solutions rooted in human rights principles. By embracing the universal language of human rights, a language that promises freedom, equality, and justice for all, we can overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. Together, we have the potential to create a more peaceful and sustainable future for our planet and its people. As we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, let's remember that it's not just a historical document, but a living testament to our shared humanity, a timeless guide. Despite conflicts that may divide us, it's in the pursuit of peace, justice, and equality that we discover our common ground. Together, we can envision a future where every individual's rights are safeguarded, conflicts are resolved through dialogue, and peace prevails. Now, more than ever, it's time for human rights. Join us as part of Human Rights 75 to help ensure that every person can live in peace and dignity.
Bien, con este mensaje,
With
hoy
this
más que nunca,
message, more than ever,
presentes la Declaración Universal
we
de los
have
Derechos
the
Humanos y este mensaje
Universal
también
Declaration,
necesitamos
this
toda la
message
economía que
that we
invierta
need
en los
the
derechos
economy
humanos
that
y que
invests in
funcione
human
para
rights,
todas las
that
personas. Agradecemos
everyone.
las preguntas
We
realizadas,
appreciate the
valoramos
questions
la
asked.
participación y el
We
interés
value the
para cerrar este
participation and interest.
espacio de
And
ciclo
to
de
close
preguntas y
this
respuestas.
space of
Pido a
Q&A,
cada uno
I will
de
ask
las dos
each one
ponentes
of our
moderadores un
speakers
mensaje
to
final.
leave us a final message. Go ahead.
Muchísimas gracias ante todo por el evento, por la
Thank you very
invitación
much
y este
for the
espacio tan
invitation and for
valoroso y
this
sí, lo
valuable
complementaría con las
space.
palabras de mi
And I
jefe,
will,
el alto comisionado
with the
general, que
words of
hablaba
my
y en
boss,
este
who just
video también
saw
lo
them
hizo,
in the video,
el momento para los derechos humanos
that the moment
es
for human
ahora
rights
y
is
es una
now.
lucha que continúa
And it's a
de la cual
struggle that
solo podemos
continues,
salir
which we
conjuntamente
need
y
to
donde
work
cada uno y
together,
cada una
where each one of
tiene un rol
us
muy
have a
importante en el
very
camino
important
hacia la
role
justicia,
in the
la
road
paz y la
to
prosperidad
justice,
para todas y
peace,
todos. Es un
and
camino largo,
sustainability for
pero
everyone.
juntos sí podemos llegar.
Long
Muchas
road,
gracias.
but together we'll do it.
Muchas
Thank you very
gracias.
much.
Adelante, doctora Clay.
Thank you. We've seen how lead is a very dangerous toxin that threatens humans' rights to live and have a healthy life in their environment. And I'd urge everyone listening to share this with people they know because it is an invisible killer and we need to solve it. And awareness is part of that. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Adelante, doctor
Thank you.
Guillermo.
Go ahead, Dr. Guillermo.
Y muchas gracias.
Sí.
Bueno,
Yes, thank you.
considero yo,
Well,
enlazando
I
estas dos
consider
presentaciones
by
previas,
linking the two
la
previous
importancia
presentations
del derecho
with the
humano
importance
al
of
derecho a la
the
salud y un
human
medio
right and
ambiente
the right to
sostenible,
health
uno
and
de
a
sus
sustainable environment,
objetivos
one of
específicos
the
puede ser
specific goals
también
may be
la
also
prevención de la
to
exposición de plomo,
prevent the
ya que
exposure to
sabemos,
lead,
como la doctora Claire
because
ha
as
expuesto
Dr. Claire
previamente,
has
existe
presented,
grandes
there
daños a la salud humana,
is a
al
significant damage to
aprovechamiento
human
económico
health
de
and
las
the
personas
economic
debido a la
health
exposición de
of
plomo.
people due to
Así que
lead exposure.
solicitamos
So
amablemente
we will
que estamos
kindly
dispuestos como
ask
LIPA a
and
colaborar en todos los
we are
esfuerzos
ready to
posibles
assist
a
in any
las comunidades
possible effort to the
del Horaz
communities
CONU,
of the Horas
Bolivia,
CONUHU,
Chile,
Bolivia,
Ecuador,
Chile,
Colombia,
Ecuador, Colombia,
Perú y
Peru,
Venezuela.
and
En este
Venezuela.
proceso estamos
And
atentos
in
para
this
poder hacer
process, we are
hermanarnos
ready to
para un
work
futuro mejor. Muchas
together for a
gracias.
better future. Thank you so
Muchas
much.
gracias, querido Guillermo, también
Thank
por
you, dear
ese
Guillermo,
pensamiento que lo
for that
necesitamos en la
offering that
actualidad.
we
Agradecemos las
need.
preguntas
We
realizadas,
thank for all the
valoramos mucho la
questions.
participación de
We
todos y
value the
reiteramos
participation
el
of everyone.
agradecimiento por
We
las
would like
excelentes
to thank for
preguntas.
the
El
excellent
día de hoy
presentations
recibimos
of today.
muchas
We have
felicitaciones en
received
nuestras
many
redes sociales.
congratulations
Muchas
in our
gracias,
social
doctor
networks.
Chris,
Thank
doctora
you very
Clay
much,
y doctor
Fritz,
Guillermo, a
Claire, and
todos
Guillermo,
los y las
to
participantes
all
del
the
equipo del
participants to
organismo
the Horas
Mujeres
Conhood
Salud y a
team,
todas las
and to all
personas
the
que
people who
participan en
participate
esta actividad que ha
in
sido
this activity,
posible
which
gracias
has
al
been possible
compromiso con
thanks to the
América
commitment
Centroamericana y
with the Andean
Latinoamericana.
and Latin American
Cedo la
integration.
palabra a la
I
doctora
give the
María del
floor to
Carmen
Dr. María
Calle
Carmen
para el cierre de
Calle
este webinar en
to
nombre del
close this
Organismo
webinar on behalf
Universal
of the Andean
por la
Health
Vida
Organization,
Original.
Hipólito
Adelante,
Unanue
querida
Agreement.
doctora Calle.
Go ahead, dear Dr. Calle.
Gracias, Bertita.
Thank
Bueno,
you,
primero
Bertita. Well, my
comenzaré con el
first words are to
agradecimiento, un
thank,
profundo agradecimiento a
deeply
Fritz, a
thankful
Claire y a Guillermo
to
por
Fritz,
haber
Claire, and Guillermo for
cosas
sharing
importantes con
many
nosotros.
important things with
El
us.
Organismo Andino de Salud
The Andean Health
definitivamente
Organization
dentro de sus marcos
definitely among their
los marcos
mandates,
están los derechos y están
we
los
have
derechos humanos.
rights and have human
Obviamente
rights.
nosotros priorizamos
We
los derechos
obviously
para todos a
prioritize
nivel de
the
salud,
right to the
pero
highest
me
level of
refiero que
health,
si no cumplimos con
but
los otros
if we don't
derechos no vamos a
comply
poder
with the other rights,
resolver el
we're
tema
not
de
going
la
to be able to
salud
have the
y
right
la
to health
bienestar.
and well-being.
El título fue excelente
Title
porque
was
estamos hablando
excellent
de
because we
derechos
are talking about
indivisibles,
indivisible,
universales,
universal,
a la
and linked to Mother Earth,
otro de los temas prioritarios
another of the
de nuestro
priority
gobierno.
topics for our
Y
institution.
también confesar que
And
uno de los
also, I
temas que
must
hemos empujado
confess
mucho en estos
that
últimos
something that we
años
have
ha
pushed in
sido los
recent
derechos
years
de niños,
have
niñas
been
y
the rights of
adolescentes.
children
Y
and
obviamente el
adolescents,
tema del cambio
and of
climático
course,
y el tema
climate
de
change issue
todas las noxas que
and
pueden
all
no permitir el
the
cumplimiento de
noxes
derechos.
that prevent the
En esta
compliance with
primera
those rights.
discusión, la idea
There's
es
no
que
discussion.
todos tenemos
The idea is
derecho
that
a
we all
todo.
have rights to
Esa es la idea,
everything.
sin
That is the
ninguna
idea,
diferencia.
with no
Pero
difference.
obviamente tenemos que hablar de
But
la
of course,
equidad.
we need
Se
to
le
talk
dará
about
más a quien más
equity.
lo
We will
necesita
give more
y
to
se
the
le
one
dará
who needs
menos a
more,
quien menos lo
and we'll give less
necesita.
to the one
Lo
that needs
importante es
less.
que en el momento
Important is
que
that
las
at some point,
desigualdades se
the
reduzcan y
inequalities are
realmente todos
reduced
podamos
and we
gozar
can
de
all
todo lo que nos da
enjoy of
la
what
modernidad, el
modernity
poder tener,
gives
estar
us to
conectados, el
be
poder
connected,
tener una vida digna, el poder
having a
tener una vivienda
dignified
adecuada,
life,
el tener agua, el
adequate
tener luz, el tener
housing, to
internet.
have water,
Porque eso también se convierte
electricity,
en
internet,
un
because that
derecho
is
humano
also, as
social.
social
El
determinant.
tema de plomo es un
The
tema
lead
que
issue
estoy relacionada
is
con ese
something
tema
that
con
I
plomo hace
related
muchísimos
for
años,
many years
porque en
because
Callao,
in
que es la provincia
in
en la
the
que
Callao,
Chiquinquirá,
which is
nosotros
the
teníamos
port
un problema
province, we
súper
had
serio.
a
Estoy hablando de
serious
hace 30 años
problem
y lo
30 years
seguimos
ago,
teniendo.
and we still have it.
Han habido avances,
So there have
pero
been
falta
some progress,
muchísimo por
but there's
hacer
many things to be
y
done.
tenemos un problema
We
definitivamente con
have
todos los que
a
son
problem with what has to
elementos,
do
¿no? Que están en
with
el medio ambiente
elements that
y
are
que
in the
vienen
environment and that has
por la
been
actividad humana. Porque la
related by
verdad
human
hay que hacerlo
activity,
así.
because that's the
Entonces,
truth.
no hay mucho
So
respeto,
there's
hay
no
muchos relaves.
respect. There are
Podríamos seguir
many
hablando de un montón
tailings.
de cosas,
We would
pero lo
continue
concreto
talking about many
es que
things, but in
nosotros sí
concrete,
creemos que
we
toda
do
persona
believe
tiene
that
derecho al
everyone
mejor
has the
nivel de
right
salud
to the
posible
highest
y
level
obviamente a la
possible
equidad
of
social.
health and to a
Es el
dignified
momento,
life.
sí, yo creo que sí es
This
el
is the time.
momento.
I think
Pero
this is the
como
time
yo
to do
dije
it
al comienzo,
because, as Fritz
¿por qué
mentioned at the
hablar de
beginning,
derechos
why
si
talk
ahora
about
que estamos
rights
en un mundo tan
if we
complicado?
have a
Justamente,
complicated world?
justamente, y
Well,
me encantó lo que
precisely.
dijo de que no es que los derechos
I
hayan
like what he said that it's not that
fracasado,
the
es
rights
que
have
la
failed,
implementación
it's
no ha
the
sido de las mejores.
implementation has not
Pero
been the
tenemos que
best.
reconocer
But
todo
we
lo que
need
hemos
to
hecho.
recognize all the
¿No?
progress
Estamos en
made.
75 años de derechos.
We have 75 years
Ya hay
anniversary.
países que ya son
There are
independientes,
countries that are
hay
independent.
grupos más
We have
vulnerables que ya tienen
more vulnerable groups that do have
consensos, que tienen reconocimientos y tienen consensos
recognitions
mundiales,
and world
cosas que no se
consensus,
veían hace
things that we
75
didn't
años.
see
Y
75
estamos en
years
el
ago.
camino, estamos en el camino.
We are on the road. It
Que
is true.
necesitamos hacer más,
We need to
definitivamente.
do more, of course.
Necesitamos hacer
We need
más
to do more
desde donde nos encontremos,
from where we
dependiendo de la
work
posición que
and
tengamos.
having the
Cada año lo vemos
responsibility.
y
Let's
hagamos
do it
lo posible por
adequately
los derechos
and do
de
it
todos y todas.
respecting the rights of
Porque
everyone.
si no protegemos los derechos de
Because if
todas
we
y
don't
todos,
protect the
estamos
rights of
reconociendo que
everyone,
los seres humanos
we
tienen
recognize
diferente
that
valor
people have different
y
value.
todos los seres humanos
All
tenemos el
human
mismo valor
values have the
y
same
tenemos
value
la
and have
necesitamos tener
this,
una vida
and we need
digna
to
para
have
desarrollarnos,
life with dignity.
para que necesitamos
No,
justicia social,
and we need
necesitamos
social justice.
justicia ambiental
We
y
need
sobre todo
environmental justice, and above
necesitamos
all,
reducir las
we need to
desigualdades.
reduce inequality.
Pero
But
tenemos que dejar de lado la indiferencia. Los que
we
estamos
need
aquí
to
no somos
forget
indifferentes,
about
porque
indifference.
si no, no te
The
podría
ones that are
decir.
here, we're
Pero
not
hay muchas
indifferent, but
personas,
there are many
muchas
people out there
organizaciones,
and many
muchos
organizations
grupos que
and
sí
many
son
groups that
indiferentes
are
ante
indifferent
el sufrimiento, el
to
dolor
the
y las
suffering, the
desigualdades
pain,
que
and
existen.
inequalities that exist.
Realmente ha sido un panel de
It has been
lujo
a
y justo es el
great
último
panel,
webinar
and this
del
is the last webinar
2023.
of
Estamos
2023.
cerrando el número
We're closing with
203.
number
Lo
203
iniciamos
since we
todo
started
en mayo del
in May
2020,
of
porque estamos
2020
totalmente convencidos,
because they're fully convinced
que la información, que
that
la
the
democratización de la
information and
información, y que
democratization of
todos
information
tenemos que saber
and
de
that
todo,
we all
su
need to
derecho también,
learn about
porque su
everything and
derecho
that
a estar
so are right
actualizado,
to be
a estar
updated
con la información
and
adecuada
have the
y
adequate
basada en
information
evidencia.
that's evidence.
Estamos hablando de derecho,
We're talking
estamos
about
hablando de
right.
vida digna, de
We're talking
dignidad,
about
pero también
dignity,
estamos hablando de solidaridad,
but it's also
de
about solidarity,
justicia
empathy,
y
justice,
también de poder
and
tener un medio ambiente que
having
permita
an
que nuestros niños
environment
se
that allows
desarrollen y
that our
que los
children
adultos
can
puedan
grow
cumplir
and the adults can fulfill their dreams. And thank you so much for being with us. Today, we're closing the seminar cycle for 2023. We're saying goodbye until January 18th, where we have webinar number 204. We wish you happy holidays, Merry Christmas, those who believe and those who don't. This Christmas holidays made us reflect, be thankful, and reconciliation. And let's get back next year with a lot of and trying to make this world better. From the Andean Health Organization, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela, fully convinced that together we're stronger and together we'll get further. Thank you very much. See you soon.